masters of horror.
Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the trends and tropes of the horror genre. We are back after our epic episode 100, so this, of course, would be episode 101. This is drug-induced horror, a.k.a. narco horror, a.k.a. some pretty trippy films. I am your host, Eric Lee, and as usual, I am joined with Mike Campbell. And from New Orleans,
Liz Williams.
And today we have a returning, very special guest, one of our very best friends of the podcast, live from Los Angeles, David Dastmalchian.
Good
Star of the screen and a author of one of our favorite comics. This is Count Crowley.
Best comic book of 2019.
Yes, and I am hoping to get some juicy dirt on what might be coming up relative to your publishing and when we can expect more, because I'm left wanting a lot more.
Yes,
of our favorite monster hunter. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me back on. Thank you for having me back on. I love the show, awesome. And congratulations on your recent anniversary. I am so thrilled to be back, and this is I'm really looking forward to this. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. We are thrilled to have you.
Yeah, because the last time we had you on, we had a full vampire. You had the Count Crowley outfit with the cowl and your teeth and the whole thing at Rose City Comic Con.
Truly inspired.
Yeah. So, but the world has changed a lot since in a year. It's gotten a lot trickier to negotiate our day-to-day lives. But we know that you've got some big things coming up. And would you like to share what you've got in store? Hopefully that we can get over coming up from you, David.
And will we see one last one addendum to Eric's question? Will we see less Kate horror monsters and more masked horror monsters as a result of COVID-19?
It's taking me a while to get there. I see what you're doing. All right.
Trying to be topical.
Masked. Yes. Everybody, wear your masks. This is such a great opportunity. This is such a great opportunity, if you like putting on a scary mask, to put some flourish on your masks. My goodness, put some teeth on those things. Add some gross, blood dripping off of the mask. Like, get with the program. We can have we can make a statement with these masks. I'm so, like I said, I'm so glad to be back with you guys. And it is a dark and scary time that we're experiencing. Hopefully this is like the birth pangs of a future that's going to be much more bright and beautiful to come. But right now we're obviously in the throes of just the real tricky time. And so little moments like this to talk about the things that we love and the things that are important to us and that we hold dear, even in, times like this, they connect us, they bond us, and they're great for escape. But it's also, and I know you guys know this, and we'll talk about it on the show today, but the lens of horror, as much of a wonderful opportunity as it is to like go on a roller coaster ride, or as an opportunity as it is to like confront our fear of death, or of all the other things that we get to do psychologically through horror, it's also a great, in my opinion, tool through which you can explore really tough and tricky questions about the world, our lives. And so thank you for bringing up Count Crowley, and thank you for always being so supportive of my comic book. It's from Dark Horse. For anybody who is watching or listening and isn't familiar, it's called Count Crowley, Reluctant Midnight Monster Hunter. Big announcement that for me, and I'm glad, because it should have been, that kind of got lost in the shuffle of what's happening recently, was that we released a trade paperback just in the last week of the first 4 issues of Count Crowley. So anybody who wants to can now get that. If they just Google it online, there's lots of ways to buy it, hopefully. Go to your local comic shop through their pickup services or delivery services. And it has all first 4 issues and lots of bonus art. And I am very excited. I'm announcing it here. When are we posting this episode? Do you know?
In a week.
Okay, great.
Like 10 days,
So this is a good announcement. Then on Sunday, July 7th, I'll be announcing it next week. So in time with the release of this podcast. So on Sunday, July the 7th, I am going to host a live stream on Twitch through the Dark Horse channel of some of great horror hosts from around the country, and I'll be in my Dr. Fearless persona. And we're going to spend 30 minutes just talking about our love of creature features and the community that we have, like what you guys have. And then afterwards, we're going to do a live watch party. I want to call it a creature feature live dead watch party where everybody, wherever they are, can get on their computers and we'll live tweet and stuff. And we're going to watch The Old Dark House, the Boris Karloff classic, which is currently streaming on Shudder right now.
Cool.
So if you're Shudder, you can watch it for free.
Heck, happy birthday, America. You get horror.
Breaking news on the Scariest Things podcast.
That's right.
This is starting a new thing. We're going to elevate us. We're going to have to come up with more, hot off the presses. This is great.
Breaking news.
That is too cool. That is so cool.
And because you have a very big movie that is actually due for release this year.
Yes.
But
Denis Villeneuve's Dune is coming out in December this year, and it's a very, there's sometimes, it's easy to get, I think, despondent or to feel pessimistic about the future, although I know we have to cling to our hope and give ourselves things to look forward to. To me, I am praying every day that the fall in the United States is going to be a great time for celebration and change for many reasons, but the winter includes a lot of exciting things to come, one of which is Denis' vision of Dune, which is going to be a film that will blow your minds. I have not seen anything. I have been, not because of all the stuff that's been going on, it's hard to communicate with folks, etc. But what I saw when I was there filming and what I know in the work, artistry, talent, and passion of someone like Denis is that people are going to go and be transported somewhere that is meaningful, emotional, and at the same time, as complex as the Herbert novel itself. And also just, we need that right now. Like I need to sit and go to Arrakis. Like I need to be transported to another place. And I'm so excited just on a selfish level to get to see what he's going to do, because that's how confident I am in I think everyone who's seen his work at this point knows what a genius he is. So it's going to be great. It's December of 2020. So we're 5-6 months out. I'm just counting the days.
Yes.
And if anybody out there is listening is familiar with the novel or previous film iterations, but especially the novel, it is a sci-fi operatic, Shakespearean level, piece of drama, but it's a horror story as well. And if you love monsters and gruesome, death, that story has a lot of it.
Awesome.
And Denis is a visionary. He is, and my understanding is he's a true fan of the Herbert work. It's not like he picked up a script and went, this might be interesting. He's a true Herbert believer.
Dune is to Denis what like the Universal and Hammer films and comic book, American especially comic books, are to me, and I think you guys, but like he was raised on that. It was his mom's favorite book. As a kid, he was raised, I don't know, I believe, don't quote me on that, but I believe it was his mom's favorite book, but I know she loved the book. And so when he was young, he was raised on Dune, and he always dreamed of someday getting to make the film. So it's like something he's been living with for decades. And now he's at the place in his career where, you know, he's achieved so much that he can have the tools that he would need to make his vision come true.
And you're talking to Yui, right?
No, I'm Piter.
No?
I'm Piter de Vries.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Nice.
oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the stills that have been released, and the costumes and the visuals just mind-blowing. So
Dr. Yue is
big coming up.
Dr. Yue is being portrayed by this phenomenal actor named Chen Chang, and he is not as well known in the United States, but in China he's like Tom Cruise. I mean, he is huge. So it's really interesting. When we were working together in Budapest, I think a lot of the American maybe crew or people that were around our area were like, oh, this guy's a really nice guy. He's really cool. But then when you'd see people who knew who he was freak out, and I got the pleasure and honor of seeing some of the work that he's doing in the film, like in person on set. And he is such a great actor. And that's such a complicated role. Every role in the film, because every role in the book is so complex and complicated. There are no, it's like, I draw the comparison a lot, but Herbert's ability to construct, you know, Shakespearean like complexity within characters is what makes that book something that you can read every few years. For me, maybe every 10 or 15 years, I've gone back to, I think I've read it 3 times now, and it's always like looking at, you know, something from all these, he shows you every plot development, every character from all these different points of view and perspective, and it's just so smart.
That's awesome.
So going back to the top, will we be seeing any more Lucas Kettner? Is that
so here is where we're at, and I can speak openly with you.
Gotta ask. All right,
I've got my candles lit here. I'm burning my candles every day. I'm sending up prayers.
Right behind you.
And there's my favorite monster hunter. So basically, the individual single issue series that came out starting last fall, which you know you were so gracious to help me promote when I was at Rose City, did really well. Like the comics are sold out, which is always great, and the critical response was great. So I was at this point in, like, let's say January, February of this year, where now we're gearing up for the trade paperback, and I was kind of like, you know, I had put together my pitch and my vision for where this story goes for years to come. Honestly, like I have some stuff I'm so excited about that is needs to happen to Jerry and because of Jerry and, you know, in spite of Jerry, and so it was like
she likes the thoughts.
Yeah,
actually, which is kind of topical.
Yeah, it is.
So we're gearing up for this big conversation. And then COVID hits, and right now, kind of the conversations about like future projects, etc. I have had to go through the painful process of just allowing to sit on the back burner for the moment. But I will tell anybody who's a fan, who's listening or watching, and to you guys, Dark Horse supports and loves the title, and we want to, you know, make it, you know, a reality in the future. So I'm cautiously optimistic that will be the thing. But regardless, like Lucas and I still talk all the time. I'm always telling him stuff that I want to do if we're given the opportunity to do it, and he is always. I've seen we've played around with a lot of stuff since the last time our stuff got to hit print, and I just dream about it so much, you guys. It's he's so good, as you know. He's the Bernie Wrightson of our time. He's a genius.
100%, yeah.
Cut straight from EC.
Yeah. You know, David, the comic was so successful. This was the order I read it in: 1, 4, 3, 2.
Really?
Every time I went to the comic book store, gone. Oh, when are you getting more in? We don't know.
Mike, you got to put it on your poll list. Mine was in my poll list, so I got mine on time.
And I said, I don't care what the story is. I just want to read it, even if I have to read the fourth one second. I'm just going to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. That means so much to me, and it really warmed my heart so much. Like, I got to go back to my hometown, Kansas City, and go to Clint's Comics, which is where I grew up buying my comics. And they had a whole wall. They'd ordered an exceptional number of the titles for issue 1s, 2, 3, and 4 because they knew that we were going to have like an in-store event. But still, to walk in to Clint's and see this image, to see Count Crowley on the wall there, and then to see the way people responded to it. And it's been fun for me because, as you know, I'm very passionate about my love and affection for all things horror, contemporary horror, which is so exciting for us in the time that we're in horror, but also classic horror. And I think there's a lot of people in the horror world, although there's tons of Venn diagram cross, pollination between horror and comics. There are those people who are into comics and never really tried horror. There's the people into horror who never really tried comics. Right. And I have a number of friends who got their first comic and got hooked. So it makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
And you're right. Speaking of drugs and intoxication, speaking of drugs and intoxication, woo, she's a mess. But I'm glad we're talking about what we're talking about today, because this is like it's obviously a fun conversation topic. Is drug horror movies and the whole subgenre that is drug horror. But first of all, anybody who's listening that doesn't know this, I just in May celebrated my 18th year of being clean and sober. I stopped.
Congratulations!
Thank you. My drug of choice the last 5 years of my addiction was heroin, but I was somebody that had struggled with everything, you name it, alcohol, pills, drugs, whatever was handy. And so I am there's so many elements, like we could do 10 podcasts about drug horror. Like there's so many elements of drug horror that are fascinating to me. One of which being something I explore in Jerry's reality. And I'm actually working on a feature film about this right now, which is I'm close to, I'll have to come back and we'll do another big announcement and podcast about that when I can talk about it. But this whole notion, like for me, when you get clean or sober or clean and sober, and you have either dismantled every amount of trust that anybody has in you, or you have broken and burned every bridge that you were ever provided between your friends and family. And then imagine showing up after you're actually getting sober, trying to get your proverbial crap together and saying to somebody, werewolves are real. Like they're going to be like, oh, you're using it again. Yeah, you're high.
The drugs aren't scary enough.
Right.
You need to add this other element to make it even more scary.
Yep.
So that's terrifying. Liz, yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna ask Liz, because I think some of the things about drug horror that we get played a couple of different ways. Sometimes it gets played for your stoner comedies, and sometimes it's just the raw, the terror that is narcotic addiction. What kind of films had you been sort of sorting through as you went you're picking for your films?
So I have one on each side of the spectrum. I have one that some people are not going to consider a horror film that to me is one of the most horrifying films I have ever seen. And I rewatching it for this, I didn't want to do it, but I did. And I turned it off in the last 20 minutes because I don't ever want to see a scene that when I talk about the movie, people who have seen it will know what I'm talking about. And then I also went to one that is kind of, I mean, it's not fun, but a little bit on the lighter side, even though it's still serious horror. But personally, I do not gravitate towards addiction and drug horror movies. I'm a procedural person. I always pick serial killers and cops, and that's the kind of TV I like and stuff. And I always want murders. I never want, drugs. So I'm not a Narcos fan. I'm more of a, I like the Law and Order where it's the murder and not the drug dealer. So this was kind of a hard one for me. personally.
I saw it breaking out into 3 groupings. Okay. Although I agree with David, and that we could easily do within those 3 groupings. You could do 10 podcasts. I think it's where drugs are the primary element of the film, of the horror film. So that's one pocket. The second pocket is directors who are clearly drug-addled and want to produce a psychedelic perspective on film. And then the third element is films that are specifically made for people who are taking
on drugs,
psychotropic drugs. Those are the 3 pockets I could find, because it was interesting when I started to do research. That's sort of like how it fell in, because you can go all the way back, and we talked a little bit about this in technological horror. You can go all the way back to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and
the original,
sort of the original mystery drug, and you can go all the way to the present. But those were kind of the pockets, because a lot of the films, it was interesting. A lot of the films were really, really geared towards, or a lot of the lists that people would produce online, and a lot of were developed around directors who were directing, like Jodorowsky and whatnot, were directing films that are purposefully bizarre and have a very, very bizarre intent in mind to create this whole psychedelic universe.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, yes. It is
interesting.
There are the kind of the swirling attitudes, from the different perspectives. I think it does give filmmakers the opportunity to deal with some very, very difficult things, right? And to put the fantastical twist to it, right, to get the point across. Where you can watch things like Leaving Las Vegas, or My Own Private Idaho, or those are
Drugs for Cowboy.
Just truly dark horror films that just are straight up dramas.
We could do a whole subgenre of drug culture films in Portland.
We could, yes.
I feel like I know what Liz is going to say, by the way. I feel like I'm pretty certain of what you're going to say, and I just want to drop a clue. Does somebody lose a limb at the end of that?
Liz?
Ooh.
There's a gangrenous limb. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So this is we know what
all right. We're on. It's on.
Preview.
It's on.
So
telegraphing.
Let's get this thing kicked off then
with our guest,
with David's first selection of narco horror.
So let's talk about psychedelic horror first and foremost, because it's for anybody out there who's fascinated with psychedelic culture or experimented with psychedelic culture. I certainly experimented a great deal with psychedelics back in my early drug use days, and it's such a complicated subject because I'm so grateful for some of the doors of perception, for lack of a better term, that were opened by my experimentation with psychedelic drugs, but also the frightening element involved with their potential to exacerbate and throw fuel on the fire of mental illness or mental complications, which I have struggled with as someone who's what we call in recovery a dual diagnosis. I'm someone who has mental illness as well as addiction issues. So that's perfect ground to explore horror with, if especially if you're me. And I made some early big mistakes with psychedelic cinematic watching. There was no internet back then. It was all word of mouth, like, oh, you got to drop acid and watch this movie, or you got to trip and watch this. And I made some really bad choices, including at a too young of an age, A Clockwork Orange, which was not cool. Then get this, when I was in high school, there's a whole podcast about this. Me and some friends were tripping, and we'd heard there was this really great, cool John McNaughton movie that somebody had a VHS of. So we popped it in. Yes, we did. We watched Henry. And I was
man.
Talk about a bad trip. So anyway, but I did this.
Hiding in the closet for a month.
Yeah. So I did
hiding
this.
in the closet.
By the way, yeah, I've gotten to know Rooker over the years. We've worked together on a film, and we've become friends. And I love asking him stories about Henry because he's so damn good in that movie. But that's a sidebar. So then I did at one point while tripping had been turned on to Altered States. So that's the first film I want to talk about. Altered States. At the time that I saw the film, I was pretty young. I want to say I was in my, teens, late teens. And at that point I was very familiar. I'd seen William Hurt in a lot of stuff. And I've just always been so more engaged with and different kinds of horror that I've grown to love over the years. Obviously there's the, everything. I love everything from Toxic Avenger to, speaking of Jekyll and Hyde, my God, like one of my favorite films. But performative explorations of deep character studies like what Hurt does in Altered States is what makes the film to me, or it made the film to me really extra haunting and meaningful and scary. To some, I think that it's a subject matter that maybe could have been explored with more camp, perhaps, or something. I don't know, because the film tonally is a strange movie, and then rewatching it years later and seeing some of the things that don't work with the film, and it makes sense that the film's kind of all over the place because it definitely had a storied production. But man, the stuff that he sees, all the dark religious imagery, the satanic stuff, the hell stuff, the alien stuff. It's like, and it's always really scary to me and horrifying when it's a really, really smart person who's very like a scientist character that's exploring a realm that we're watching with them, and we're 1,000% on board believing this is stuff that's really happening. And by the way, it couldn't not be happening because this person's too smart for it not to be happening. And watching the dissolution of his relationship with his wife, which is a great performance by Blair Brown. And I really I love the film. I think it's all over the place. It's totally wacky. Bob Balaban has always been one of my favorite people to see and stuff. And it's great looking back on what a great addition he makes to that cast. And for those who don't know, the film itself was actually written by an incredible American writer named Paddy Chayefsky, who ended up being so frustrated with the way that the director Ken Russell was making the film. Or I don't know what the whole story is, or if Ken Russell didn't like the way Paddy Chayefsky was rewriting as they were shooting. But needless to say, there was such a rift, there was such a feud between these people making this film, that Chayefsky didn't even put his name on the movie when it came out. I don't know if you guys know that. He I think it's credited.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. And Ken Russell, visionary filmmaker, definitely did just some amazing stuff. And so yeah, I wanted to bring that one in.
Follow-up. Was this before or after Lair of the White Worm?
Before, but this was his follow-up to Tommy.
Oh,
I think, yeah, because he had like a huge gap between Tommy and
we can look it up.
Into Altered States, yeah. Like,
I know KB is your friend. No, I do think that I remember from Altered States was the de-evolution kind, where he sort of the transformative, the shift of that Simeon.
Oh,
kind of, that was because I saw it it's been a very long time since I've seen it. I think it was like 16, or something like that. And the whole notion of sort of the sensory deprivation and really shutting yourself off and letting that whole the hallucinogenic infestation kick in. And I think one of the classic things with sort of the hallucinogenic themed movies is it real or is it not? Is it and you will end up hitting these reality loops, and you need that sort of the third party intervention to determine whether
the horror is the lack of control in that loop.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then that's where you get the horror.
And oftentimes it's sometimes, it's the tapping into something beyond everybody else's reality.
Yeah.
That you can see things that other people can't.
Have you ever gone into an isolation chamber?
I have not. Actually, I was going to ask.
I did one.
David, have you ever gone in?
Liz
You
is
did?
nodding.
Okay. Have you ever gone into an isolation chamber? Have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
I've
like
wanted to forever.
afraid to do
Based
it
on-
because
based
I
solely
thought
on
I was
this
going to
movie.
trip, and then kind of pissed that I didn't trip after I got out of it. I was like really scared to get in, and then like really mad at the end of my 56 minutes or whatever that nothing
Did you just
happened.
get
I just
bored?
floated. Yeah. So
Yeah.
weird though.
Yeah, but the tanks look like the tank that he gets into. At least the one, there's a place in
Right.
Chicago that had these sensory deprivation chambers, and it looked like the tank, except the one that I was at was there was a horizontal and his is vertical, and it was just like so strange. But I will say to anybody out there who's listening or watching today who has a history or dabbled with psychedelics, there's that the rules of going through the looking glass, one of which being don't look in a mirror. Like, you're not supposed to look in a mirror, cover the mirror.
Yeah.
And in this film, what happened to me sometimes when I was tripping too hard is that exact thing, like seeing like the de-evolution of my face in a mirror, like through hallucination and shadows moving. One time I remember feeling like I looked like a Cro-Magnon and being like, and seeing the way that like the mind can play fascinating tricks on you when you're tripping, and how things seem to move and ripple, and the way that they do that in the film is it's really horrifying. It's like there's parts of it that remind me of The Fly, and
certainly body horror stuff in there. Tapping into the primordial brain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The very the alligator stem, and what kind of secrets. There's always this talk about what the percentage of how much of your brain do you actually use, and being able to try to tap into those things, which is often the lure.
Oh yeah.
Of psychotropic drugs, is to try and access things that you believe you might not have normally available to you, and open things up. And then and a lot of these movies, they go, that's probably not the best idea in the world.
Well, that's Hurt's character's ambition in the beginning. I think he's trying to treat maybe schizophrenia or something, but basically he talks about that. We're using 8%, or we only use 15% of our brain, and so like the expansion, the possibility, and there's facts in that. I love reading the Timothy Leary stuff, and I still go back to, and I just was not long ago watching this really cool Ram Dass thing on YouTube about when he tried the stuff. But it's cautionary tale. It's scary as heck. So are we?
Cautionary tale. I
give it a recommend. I think if you're home and you've never seen it or you're interested, I think you should check out this film.
Yeah,
and I think it has gotten kind of lost in the shuffle of the time and when it was done. So for our audience who is 30 or younger, who may not be aware of this film, it really is. It's something else.
Yeah.
It is. It's a serious big studio production film. It's with so the acting savants.
Oh my God! Yeah.
William Hurt, who has this. He kind of has this kind of glassy-eyed look a lot of the time, anyway. And it's utterly convincing, and his kind of somber way he handles a lot of his movies, but just so smart.
Incredibly so.
Nice.
I think Michael Pollan needs to do a remake of Altered States.
So
bring it into the modern era.
I'd like to hand off, because I'm really curious about this discussion of the gangrenous limb.
Oh, all right.
And I'd like to hear from Liz.
Okay.
I don't know what.
I'll flip it then.
David knows
So
what it is.
this will be my number one. Then I'm going to flip it. And this is 2000's Darren Aronofsky film Requiem for a Dream. This is not a traditional horror film. I guess it would be more of a psychological drama, but it is. From the first time I saw this, which I guess was 20 years ago because I saw it in the movie theater, which freaks me out that it's 20 years ago. I have never forgot this movie, and it is one of the most uncomfortable experiences you'll have watching a film. So this film was based on a 1978 book by Herbert Selby Jr. It stars Ellen Burstyn, Jennifer Connelly, Jared Leto, and Marlon Wayans. And Ellen Burstyn was nominated for Academy Award and Golden Globe for Best Actress for her portrayal of Sarah, who is an elderly woman who's lost her husband, who lives alone in Brighton Beach, Coney Island area. And her son, Harry, played by Jared Leto, is a heroin addict. He's always taking her TV down to the pawn shop, and her really only relationship is with her television. She watches these infomercials. And one day she gets a phone call saying that, hey, you had applied to be on these game shows. You're in. We're going to send you this letter. You fill it out. So she is super excited to go on this game show, but she wants to wear this dress she hadn't worn in years, and it doesn't fit her. She's gained too much weight. So her spiral into addiction is through diet pills, which now I guess people aren't really as into diet pills, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had fen-phen, we had all this crazy stuff going on with diet pills. So she is pretty much on methamphetamines, and she loses her weight, but she spirals into amphetamine psychosis, and her performance is absolutely insane. Meanwhile, Jared Leto and his best friend Tyrone, played by Marlon Wayans, are two heroin addicts who are trying to make it big. So if they can just get some drugs and sell it, they'll be able to get Marion, Harry's girlfriend, played by Jennifer Connelly, a shop so she can become a designer. And, you know, everything will be great if we can just sell these drugs and make it through. But boy, it's not great. So throughout the film,
it is great, but it isn't great.
It's not great. Throughout the film, you know, each character just deteriorates. Marlon Wayans ends up in jail. Jared Leto, because he's involved with the mob trying to get his drugs. Jared Leto is just more and more addicted, and he's the one with our gangrenous arm where he's shooting up into almost an open sore. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying. And then the one that is the hardest hit is Marion. She kind of is a girl from an uppity family. She, you know, has to do things to convince her parents not to cut her off. But she says at one point, you know, yeah, they give me money, but that's not what I wanted from them. She's she's filling a hole that she's looking for love for her parents. And her addiction just leads her into prostitution in one of the most harrowing scenes I have ever seen in my life, which is the movie's rated NC-17. So I guess if you get the R-rated version, you are not going to get the scene. I don't even want to talk about it. It's horrifying, and you'll know it when you see it. Let's put it that way. So this is my number one horror. This is the most horrifying drug movie I've ever seen, and I think it's because nowhere in this are drugs fun. It's all different kinds of drugs. Ellen Burstyn's character with the diet pill she's struggling with, also because the infomercial she's watching is telling you that sugar is a drug and red meat is a drug. So you shouldn't be eating that. It should be easy to lose weight. So it's coming from all sides, all different walks of life. And I've never read the book, but so if the book was written in 78, and then the movie was made in 2000, and it's 20 years later, and it still holds up. The only thing that really takes it out of right now is some of the clothes. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You always have the same problems. It might be a different drug or something like that. Maybe the opioid crisis instead of diet pills now. But it is, it's a really, really, really hard watch that I knew I wanted to talk about it, but I did not want to watch it again. But I did. I pushed through.
You did? You got to watch it again?
I did, but I didn't watch the last 20 minutes. I did not. I gave up with shooting into the gangrenous arm, and then they end up in the hospital, and I said, that's it. I'm out. I know what's coming next, and I can't do it. So Jennifer Connelly, hats off to you.
There's a scene in Stephen King's Dr. Sleep that when I was reading the book, I thought, oh my God, how are they ever going to shoot this? This is so terrible and so horrible, dealing with Danny's addiction. And they didn't. They kind of didn't. They sort of left it out of the movie because I think it was so god awful horrifying that the director, whose name I'm blanking on, Mike.
Oh, it's Flanagan. Mike Flanagan.
Flanagan.
Yes. Yeah. He left that out, and I thought, boy, that was an interesting artistic choice because that really was like, yeah. So I mean, sometimes you put it in, sometimes you take it out.
They didn't leave it out of this one.
Addiction and mental illness are two of the most frightening things about the human experience to me, from my lens and like how I've walked this journey as a person on Earth. And so when they are just brought to life in such a vivid and horrifying fashion, you got to know, like, oh man, that movie though, you're right, it hurts your stomach. It's one of those, to me, I could only watch once. I've watched it once. I'm grateful that I watched it once. I think Aronofsky's such an insanely talented filmmaker, and those actors all give such stunning performances. When we went, I actually made a film, an indie that came out in 2014. Actually 2015 it came out, called Animals, and it's about two addicts who are kind of spiraling. And when we were going to make it, we were like, boy, they already did such a fantastic job with everything from Panic in Needle Park to Requiem to Drugstore Cowboy. Like, what are we going to throw into the mix? And so I feel like my story has some, without glossing it or making it too rosy, I was like, I want to create counter programming that has some potential for hope or optimism at the end, because man, Requiem is as bleak as it gets. Hope. And the horror, the body horror in it and the makeup work is so phenomenal. There's a really talented makeup artist named Vincent Guistini who has done a ton of film work, but Vincent did the Ellen Burstyn age work on that film. And his experience, you can tell, with latex and with horror and with his fearlessness to take her, and her as an actor's fearlessness to go where they needed her to go, with the makeup integrated with the performance. It's something that you can't overlook when you go back. And if anybody is brave enough, like Liz was, to rewatch that film, some of the makeup and the horror makeup work in that is stunning.
And Mike, you're a soundtrack guy. This soundtrack is composed by Manzel, who is from that Pop Will Eat Itself, that like God, that's a 90s 2000 band right there. Very, very cool score and soundtrack. So yeah, I mean, watch it once, but there's no hope. Make sure you're watching like Tommy Boy or Happy Gilmore or something after, where you can turn off your brain and just laugh, because this is
just go to the Abbott and Costello Universal horror films after. That's what you got to do.
That's a great idea. Turn your brain off. All right, Eric. So you want to bring it in? Oh,
all right. Well, I think I'm going to go with. Now, I cannot claim to have a deep knowledge, personal experience with narcotics, but I will go to my one touchstone moment where and this is actually in your hometown, Liz. I don't know if I've talked about this before. This movie is Shrooms.
Yeah.
2007. And it's directed by Paddy Bretnock, who did something called Freak Dog. So I think Paddy, he hasn't done a lot. No, this is his big movie.
He's an Irish director.
Yes. Yeah. This is a very Irish centric. The bunch of 5 Americans go to, or 4 Americans meet their buddy who's I think it's 5 Americans.
5 Americans.
5 Americans and meet their college buddy who's Irish, and they go out into the woods to go on a shroom vacation.
Right.
Because it's natural. Nothing bad can happen from that. And I was told exactly the same thing when I went to New Orleans, visiting our patron and good friend Chris Ralph. Hey, Chris. Thanks for the experience. But it was, it's like, we just put it in the tea, and we'll watch Star Wars. It's going to be great. And
we were trying to recreate the scene in Easy Rider.
Well, it was actually, you know what? Okay, I don't know if you recall, but this is right after I graduated from college. My architecture design partner and I, Mike McDaniel, got in his Nissan pickup truck and we drove across the country.
Right.
right? And this was the return leg, so we hit New Orleans on Halloween.
Oh yeah.
You really were trying to recreate Easy Rider.
Yes. So it was spot on. And
Well, I was out there
and of course
somewhere. We didn't run into each other.
No, well, I think you would have been had I known, we would have invited you over. We were on. I think it's on Burgundy and right in the middle of the quarter. He's on the second story, in one of the old. I think he was in an old slave quarters apartment. And I think that the peer pressure, which is something I think.
Definitely.
I think
that's the whole.
And this is the kind of a thing because
Shrooms is peer pressure.
Yeah, and it was the kind of a thing. It's like, don't worry, it's not like acid because it's natural. It's like, this is gonna be great. And and of course it was. Well, it wasn't Chris who foisted this on me. To be honest, Chris, this was. There were two lovely young women who were also at the apartment. Also
90s in New
Orleans.
You were definitely tripping.
On Halloween, there was a parade happening. We took mushroom tea, and because one of the things that the Shrooms did was it sort of releases any common sense that you might happen to have at the moment.
Right. Was there a sadistic Catholic monk?
No, there was nothing sadistic. I mean, this. I was
just trying to get you back to Shrooms.
Well,
yeah. We're talking about Eric's 1990s Halloween.
This is
it's his horror movie of choice.
But I think there is a tie-in because in Shrooms, there's a moment where one of the guys talks to a cow.
That's right.
I came out from the house and I wandered out onto Royal Street, I think it was, and one of the horse and carriage carts. I walked the block and got lost.
Yep.
Right.
Sounds about right.
And everybody was in masks and was having a good time, and I was going, and I went one block. I lost track of it. I didn't know. I forgot where the door was for the apartment, and so I had to ask the nearest person. But the nearest person that I could talk to was a horse.
Yep.
I talked to. It was a horse and cart, and I went, "Hey, horse, I'm lost." And the carriage driver goes, "Hey, kid, get away from my horse."
Yeah, that's about right.
Oh, sorry, man. I thought, horse knew because, this is a taxi thing and, door to door. And then I hear, "Oh, there's Eric, go get him." And it's like, "Oh, hey guys." And then I panicked because I realized I had gotten lost going one block, and I hid under a blanket while Fricka, the wonder dog, come up and licked me. It was,
But the scene in Shrooms where he talks
to a cow.
Talks to the cow is really hysterical.
Yeah.
It is really fun.
And so
even though it is a pretty bleak film.
It's bleak. That movie's dark.
Yeah.
It really is.
And I think that, but this one is filled with tropes. I think when I was watching this movie, I had some of the criticisms was like, well, I kind of wish it was more about the Shrooms.
Right.
But in the end, it really was.
100%.
Yeah, because it has this fantastic wraparound.
And I never catch those wraparounds. I am so dumb when I watch films like that, and I did not see that coming.
Yeah,
David,
did you see it coming?
There's a great twist at the end.
Yeah, the twist.
Yeah.
So, I'm okay, now that I've done my own personal story, an extended cut. So the plot is roughly, hey, let's go do some shrooms in the woods. It's natural. It's completely safe. Plus, of course, you go camping in the Irish backwoods where a number of drug-addled degenerates with a gruesome and murderous past also happen to be in the area.
Yeah.
So there's the wrinkle.
I'm not blaming the Shrooms, though. If you go camping out there, you're pretty much screwed whether you're high or not. It sounds like.
I think but that's part of the ironic twist, Liz, if you haven't seen this movie.
I haven't.
The degenerates are a bit of a MacGuffin.
Oh,
okay.
100%. Yeah.
And so
they're definitely the Boo Radley. You're made to think you're wandering into wrong turn.
Yeah,
but it's not wrong turn.
Yeah, because they are drooling hillbillies, Irish style.
Right.
And because they
literally drooling.
Yes, there's a lot of drool, and our lead actress Tara, or Lindsay Hahn, who plays Tara, who's the reluctant good girl. We have Jack Houston as Jake, the Irish guide and love interest. We have Max Cash as Troy, the prototype stoner. Maya Hazen as Lisa, the best friend, and Alice, boy, she's got a crazy last name, Geszyn, Geczyn, as is Holly, who's the hairy armpitted hippie. And lastly, we have Ludo, the jock. So cardboard cutout characters, and they all fall into what these kinds of characters typically fall into in these scenarios. And you can sort of, there's a little bit of the by the numbers, they get killed off. But you get the straightforward trophy stuff. You get the cabin in the woods trope. You get the chase in the woods trope. You got, again, the drooly degenerate hillbillies. You have split up the party happening a lot. You have the creepy abandoned asylum or old castle out there. Some of them get lost in. There's a final girl, and in the end, it really comes back to a moment where Tara wasn't around to find out that there's two types of mushrooms that they were looking for. The psychocylic ones, which they say there's these brown mushrooms with a little nipple on it. They say that's what we're looking for. Don't eat the one with the black tip, right?
Oops.
The black nipple on it. And she wasn't around to hear that, so she eats one of those things. And the warning was, this is the death's head fungi. Your heart, you risk having your heart exploding along with your lungs and kidneys. But if you do survive it, they believe that the local Irish Druids believe that it was a border to another dimension that you could tap into, the ability to commune with the dead, and it would make people this ferocious and sometimes give you the gift of foresight and premonitions. Right. So she starts flashing forward to a lot of these things, and she sees the death of her friends, and she's panicking and trying to protect them, and she can't stop it. And then the wraparound. Right. I won't spoil it. It's fantastic. Yeah. And so this is
it's what's horrifying again about. Yeah. And as I recall, it's got that horror of, what is reality, the questioning of reality, what is time, what is all of that, which psychedelics, are can be an interesting way to explore, but in the wrong circumstances, or as in this film, with the wrong mental, if you have any kind of mental issues going into that stuff, and then you take the stuff, and as we see in that film, it happens to a couple of people, but especially the main character. It's horrifying, and it's definitely one of those. If you guys are going to go rent it or watch it, stick around till the very end, because there is a really great, wonderful slam dunk.
Yeah. And don't be turned off by the name, because the name implies sort of a like a full moon trauma kind of production. Yeah. It is not that. Right. It is not that.
Right.
That's my only complaint about the movie, is the name is pretty damn dumb.
Yeah,
but it's a great movie.
Yeah, no, it has I do like the poster art where the mushrooms sort of curl around and they form a skull.
Yeah,
that poster was awesome. I remember that poster was really cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's it's a fairly conventional horror film, but the narcotic aspect, again, like as David was describing. Since everybody's on them, they're what they see, they can't tell if they're tripping or whether it's real. And then you throw the hillbillies in there, and it's a fun watch. This one is a cautionary tale, but it's also fun, which is unlike, say, Requiem for a Dream, which sounds like it was absolutely not fun at all.
Not fun.
So that's my first of my daily double here.
All right.
I'll pass it off to Mike.
All right. Speaking of not fun, I have a question for you guys. What do you think the most powerful drug is? Eric.
I'll go with heroin.
No. David.
DMT.
No. This is a trick question, by the way. Liz.
I was going to say heroin, but now it's a trick question. Friendship?
It is a trick question.
Love?
David got it.
Adrenaline?
Love is the most powerful drug.
That's what they sing about.
Is it Brian Ferry, or who's the
no. Right.
Yeah.
So of course I am talking about a film, also from the early '80s, much like Altered States. This is a film directed by Andrzej Zalawarski, who I think is a Polish director. This is sort of a mashup. If you took Lars von Trier's Antichrist, you took David Cronenberg's The Brood, and then you took Ingmar Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage and sort of squished it all together, you would get Possession, which is...
I've been trying to find this.
Well, hey,
tell me where to see it.
It does not exist. I had to get it from Movie Madness.
We don't have Movie Madness.
Store. I know, and here's the thing. Movie Madness, you have to make an appointment now.
I was going to say, how do you get to Movie Madness? Last time I knew they were closed.
You have to make an appointment, and my appointment was like, the closest appointment I could get was like 4 days after I rented it, and then I had to show up, and then they shoved a paper bag at me.
So it was a dirty transaction.
It was a dirty transaction, but I got to see. This is a film with a woman, a female actress named Isabel Adjani, and then the great Sam Neill. It essentially involves Sam Neill as a spy. And his wife, Isabella Adjani, they are in the middle of the most tumultuous, horrifying breakup I've ever seen on film in my life. And it gets increasingly tortured, increasingly volatile, increasingly violent. Sam Neill is he is completely torn, and he cannot put aside the fact that his marriage is totally devolving. And thrown in the middle of this is this weird, which I can only describe as a kind of a Cthulhu-like creature, which appears to be pulling a lot of strings, at least for her. And it may be tied back to his international spydom. Very unclear. It's a long movie. It probably could have been edited down just a wee bit. And but I think it's easy to see why a lot of people, when it first came out, a lot of people were like, "No, this is too much. We can't. It's too much to process. It's too much to think about. We don't even really understand what all this means." A lot of film historians have talked about the fact that it was really just kind of like symbolic of, because it's all shot in West Germany, and so 1981, of course, you still have East Germany, and so a lot of they talked about how the breakup or the dissolution of marriage was like somehow symbolic or
the wall,
emblematic of the wall, kind of a thing. But as far as I know, the East-West German relationship did not have a H.P. Lovecraft element to it.
I don't know. I wasn't there.
This one does. The only thing, the only sort of real like drug element is at one point Sam Neill tries to pin a suicide, or he tries to he kills one of her suitors, one of his wife's suitors, and tries to pin it as a suicide through drugs. That's kind of the drug element. Otherwise, it's kind of what I was referring to earlier, which is, a lot of the films don't necessarily involve drugs, but it involves a filmmaker who clearly has a sort of psychedelic perspective in mind, and this really does come true with that. But I'm not kidding when I say it really is kind of the perfect matchup of the Antichrist and Scenes from a Marriage and The Brood, because it's like you watch it and you just go, I don't know what the hell. I honestly don't know what I'm looking at here.
It has a famous scene where Isabella Adjani is sort of running down a tunnel,
right,
and totally spinning around, freaking out, and it goes on into a picture.
It's like
it goes on for like 5 minutes.
She's insane. She's so amazing, man. She's so amazing. And the film also does, Mike, it deals with alcoholism, I feel like, in a certain regard. There is like some insane like binge drinking. But yeah, it's not a quote unquote drug movie, but the effects of trauma on people who are in the disillusion of like the relationship, or like finding out that somebody you love is like is having something extramarital happening. Imagine if like you went and you're trying to make something work with somebody, and you go to where they're meeting up with their lover, and it's like some creature that they're having sex with. Like, oh my God.
I've been trying to get my hands on this.
It is, well, so here's the other than movie madness, there's a standard definition, maybe not even standard definition because it looks like it's like cut short version on Vimeo. So if you really, want to poke around in the dark recesses of the internet, you can find a really crappy copy. But otherwise,
I wonder if you can find it on Vinegar Syndrome or one of the.
No. It's an out of print DVD. In fact, I had to put down $150 deposit at Movie Madness to get this stupid DVD.
So, David, do you have an archive that you can go to, a video? Like, I'm sure
LA's got to have one.
Still has video store options that you can go to.
There are, yes. There's the Saturday Matinee is a fantastic place for just VHS. If there's something you really want and you want me to try and find it, if it's super hard to find, let me know. And those guys are fantastic about finding, but they only carry VHS. So there's tons of stuff that you're like, right, that's impossible to track down. And I'm like, let's go to the Saturday Matinee and see if we can find it there. And then also there's a couple places that have sadly closed, like Rocket in the last couple of years, but there's tons of resources. And also now there's more obviously like online mail order companies that are popping up. One name just completely escapes me, and it's disappointing because I wish I could give them a shout out. I'll have to look in my email, but I just ordered some stuff that I couldn't find anywhere else. But you know what I mean? Yeah, it's you.
Arrow?
No, they're great. I'll look and see. Anyway, it's but you have to have that place. I had it when I lived in Chicago at Facets, and then I had it when I lived in New York, and I have it now that I live in Los Angeles. And I feel like even in small towns, like I remember being up in Milwaukee, and I can't remember the name of the place, but my friend, I was like, oh, I bet you'd have a hard time finding such and such movie. And she was like, no, look. And we went to their place. And so, yeah.
I need a place.
Right.
Need a place.
I need a place.
You do need a place. Oh my God.
So let's wrap back around and let David, your second film.
Speaking of needing a place, don't take a walk down the infamous Toad Road. It is. It is only going to lead to destruction and despair. This is a film, and I hope people will discover it through our conversation today, that I think definitely begs to be seen if you're looking to explore not only drug horror, but indie horror and indie drama horror. It was something released, I believe, on the film festival circuit. I discovered it just based on reading reviews and stuff online a couple of years ago. It probably came out in 2012, 2013, 2012. And let me look. Anyway, it's
2012.
Inspired by an urban legend in Pennsylvania about this place called Toad Road, which is like one of the 7 gateways to hell, which I grew up in a community that feels very similar to the world in which Toad Road exists. I grew up in Kansas, but near where I lived was a place called Stoll, Kansas. And in Stoll was the church, the old abandoned, burned down church in Stoll, which those of us who grew up in the area, it was out near Lawrence, Kansas, the small town called Stoll. You would take drugs or drink and, go and it supposedly you could throw a bottle against the wall, and if it didn't shatter, that meant that the devil was present or that the portal was opening to hell. And awesome. It's fascinating. And as a grown up now and looking back on that, thinking about like the absurdity of some of those myths and legends from our localities, everything from the spook lights to everybody had them wherever they grew up. But like with what part of that is real? What part of that is if not physically real, what's tapped into something that could mean something? And so in Toad Road, a film that is shot more or less like a documentary, it feels a lot like a Harmony Korine film smashed up with a Tobe Hooper film. It's got all this found footagey feeling way of verite shooting that you get to know these main characters, and there's this kind of following this main character, a really great performance by this guy. I can't remember his name, but he and this girl who's played by an actress who tragically actually passed away from a drug overdose shortly after the film was either produced or released. Her name was Sarah Jones. She wants to take acid and go out to Toad Road and, you know, see if what the legend is all about. So they go out there, they take the drugs, and stuff does not go well. Let's say that. It's a trippy, scary, weird movie that is definitely avant-garde in certain respects. The narrative is loopy and untraditional, and it's just a really cool movie that looks, and I'm sure it was shot on a shoestring, and yet he achieved some really great shots. The cinematography is really cool, and the performances, again, they used a lot of non-actors, which always excites me when I'm watching something, especially if they're good. So I give it go find that Toad Road.
All right.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Toad Road.
I've heard of it, but not seen it. So
unlike Possession, you can't actually see this online.
You can see
Amazon,
this.
so you have to hunt for it a little bit.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Liz.
All right. Mine is one that we've talked about before and is one of my favorite films of the last couple of years. And this is Panos Cosmatos' Mandy. This one's got drugs on all different levels. So this film is about a guy named Red who takes revenge on the hippie drug cult that kidnap and murder his wife, Mandy. So on the way to work at the gas station, Mandy, who is played by Andrea Riseborough, and she's an artist and loves reading like fantasy books. She walks past a van that is carrying this hippie cult called the Children of the New Dawn, and they're led by this guy named Jeremiah Sand, who is played by Linus Roach, who is familiar to anybody who watches like Law and Order and Vikings. You'll recognize him. He's that guy.
Oh yeah.
And he says, like, I need this girl. I can't stop thinking about her. And you can't. Andrea Riseborough is haunting in this film, just looking at her. So they decide that they're going to use the help of their demonic biker gang called the Black Skulls. And the Black Skulls are a biker gang that became like these creatures from taking bad acid. So they use the biker gang to kidnap Mandy and subdue Red, and they dose them up and murder Mandy in a horrifying fashion. And the rest of the movie is Nicolas Cage just in a rage, reaping revenge on the people that killed his wife. So
full Nick Cage action.
Full Nick Cage, and a great use of full Nick Cage, like the best one.
Yes. Oh my!
It's also like a love story to like heavy metal album covers. The critic Brian Talerco, who writes for the Siskel and Ebert, called it a Queensryche concept album like cover, and kind of reminds you of the old heavy metal movie too, or comics, with the flames and swords and things like that. So it's crazy. Chainsaws. There is an epic chainsaw battle. And also, which I was thinking about at the end of this, there's like an A-frame that gets set on fire. And I was like, man, Midsummer was going to be my other drug pick. And that also has an A-frame at the end of it that gets set on fire. Maybe that's one of my wheelhouses when I'm coming into horror movies is A-frames out in the woods. But, we've talked about Mandy a lot before. It's great drugs all around. Not fun drugs, but, this one's LSD tripping out, and the way it looks is super trippy. So
yeah, the classic Argento, magenta, and cyan color scheme kicking in. It's a color riot. It is a beautiful looking.
It's gorgeous. The soundtrack is amazing. It's just the right amount of Nicolas Cage. He's always too much, but this one says, "Give it all to me," and it's wonderful. So, Eric, next. What's yours?
Okay, I'm pausing things.
All right, I saw that. Okay,
we're getting a lot of backbeat. Is it coming from my? It is coming.
I can't hear anything.
Check. I've got the speakers turned off, so is coming from.
Man, I love Mandy. I'm glad you chose it. It is definitely there's that also the inspiration of the Barker in there that I don't think it was given a lot of shout outs when the film first came out. I definitely felt the Hellraiser kind of vibe,
yeah.
especially with that crazy cult of demons that they summon. And it's true when you give an incredible performance like what Nick Cage and the rest of the cast, which are all phenomenal in that film, you get me. You hook me.
Mm-hmm.
All the other stuff, all the bells and whistles are awesome, and I love that. But when you add in a performance that's that committed, take my money. Take it.
100%. I agree. Panos Cosmatos, you have us. Yeah.
Beyond the Black Rainbow, similar kind of
oh my gosh, yeah.
Sort of
A slower burn, though,
yeah.
Beyond the Black Rainbow.
Yeah.
Way slower burn.
Yeah.
All right,
So,
Eric.
All right. Spinning back around to me. Well, I've got this one qualifies as how the hell did I miss this?
What?
This is a Dan Coscarelli movie from 2012 called John Dies in the End.
I read that book. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, Dan Coscarelli. This is Phantasm's director,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Also Bubba Hotep, right? So
Right.
a couple of our favorite movies. And he brings his brand of very strange wackiness to this movie. It's this one is the transportive hallucinogen movie where all of a sudden it is the sort of cosmic horror. It is very hard to explain. You really need to actually to go in and watch this movie because the kinds of the time jumps and the things that happen to the characters, it doesn't fit neatly together in a linear fashion, right? Which is actually not bad for a hallucinogenic.
No, that's kind of required.
So it stars Chase Williamson as David Wong, who's actually not an Asian guy, and he's using the nom de plume so that he to keep cover because he's a young man on the run. And actually, interestingly, also Dave Wong is also the screenwriter's name, and
the author of the book's name.
He's the author of the book,
right?
And he's also a Caucasian guy, which is I think kind of interesting. And also nice in a nice ironic twist, he's hiding out in a Chinese restaurant where he's met by Arnie Blondstone, who's Paul Giamatti, the great Paul Giamatti. And I wasn't ready. I heard about this and I plugged in and I was like, oh my God, Paul Giamatti's in it. But not just that, we have Doug Jones is in this, Clancy Brown is in this, Angus Scrimm. It is loaded with a number of Coscarelli's favorites. But this involves, I think, there's a drug, and I think it's best described by the actual press release, where it's a drug that promises an out-of-body experience with each hit. On the street, they call it soy sauce, and users drift across time and dimensions, but some who come back are no longer human. Suddenly, a silent, otherworldly invasion is underway, and mankind needs a hero. What it gets instead is John and David, a pair of college dropouts who can barely hold down jobs. Can these two stop the oncoming horror in time to save humanity? No, no, they can't. And this is some great characters. Both John and David are total suckers for playing the White Knight, or more to the point, they don't fall for pretty girls in distress. Though gifted with Dave introduces himself to Arnie and does this fabulous kind of Rain Man savant trick where he can read, like he can tell how many grains of rice are in a bowl. Right? He's just got this insight, this out-of-body insight that he gets through this thing called the soy sauce, where he found he got hip to from a Jamaican dealer named Robert Marley. Okay, all Jamaicans, I guess. And he goes who pulls the same kind of a psychic sort of mind reader trick on him, and but he ends up getting injected with this stuff. He does like, no, man, I don't need this.
Right.
But he ends up getting the sauce, and they end up, both Dave and his buddy John, they fumble their way through a series of collisions with this cosmic invasion. There's these parasitic controlling hosts. Think movies like The Hidden.
Right.
Their visions are complete madness, but you know that it's actually there's some basis to reality on it because they're having the same trip. So I think there's some mind-blowing chunks of this thing. My favorite being a monster made up of meat from a meat locker, and who starts talking to them, and they try to run out of the room, and one of them, I think John tries to reach for the doorknob, and the doorknob turns into a giant penis, and he goes, I can't, we can't leave, because he doesn't want to touch the door handle. Right? It was just so there's a lot of really fun little bits. Heads explode, corpses rise, characters die, but come back to exist from another dimension. It's a weird trip. It's about as strange a concept as Phantasm was.
Oh yeah.
Which does all kinds of things like, is it a zombie movie? No. Is it a demon movie? Well, it's aliens. It's kind of hard to describe. You really need to check this thing out.
Yeah, it's like a Douglas Adams meets some crazy horror. It's such a crazy, unique film, and there needs to be more movies like that take big swings and really go for it. And they had the budget to support making it look really cool, which is fantastic too.
Yeah. It is. It is as chaotic as it is. By the time you get to the end of the movie, you get it. You really do.
Right.
But I would compare it to something like Big Trouble in Little China or Buckaroo Banzai.
Right.
And you marry that up to something like a Cronenberg film like Naked Lunch or Existence.
Yeah.
As far as the kind of weird shit that happens in it. So just trying to describe it in a couple of paragraphs, I think it's just loopy.
Sure. Just see it.
And
you gotta see it.
Yeah, I think just go out and check it out. It's this is on the fun side of, this doesn't really talk about the dangers, although you know that you die if you mess with it too much.
Yep.
It's a great title.
Yeah.
Yes. I will be quick because I know our guest needs to get on out of here. We touched on many of these elements in all of these films, but none quite tied up so nicely as the 1970 exploitation film I Drink Your
I knew you were going to do this. I knew it.
Satanic hippies, LSD,
Check.
blood cult, inspired apparently by a mountain village in Iran that was overtaken by a pack of rabid wolves. That was allegedly, according to the internet, that was the impetus for this film. It is a really fun film. I will tell you, if you're going into it thinking you're going to see some funny, goofy, kitschy romp, it is not that. It is actually pretty goddamn dark.
It's very dark. It's very dark. Yeah.
Yes, because there's a rape early on in the film, which ultimately is sort of sets the stage for the revenge and the use of the LSD and the satanic LSD infused hippies.
Right.
And there is a lot of killing and there is a lot of gore for this film. This is a film that was directed by David Durson, who did a couple other exploitation films, but very, very little.
Did he Eat Your Flesh? Because it was a combination. They usually do this as a 1-2 punch.
He did not. It was a 1-2 punch. It was an X-rated film. It was often paired with I Eat Your Skin and an earlier film called Zombies.
Was it Meat Pies? Was it Meat Pies?
Yes.
What was it? It was Meat Pies, right?
Yes. It was Meat Pies. It was meat pies.
Dog meat, wasn't it?
It was from dog meat.
Yeah.
It was tainted dog meat. And it is a whole ball of craziness. It still holds up. I will tell you, I saw a 35 millimeter print of this about 4 years ago, and it is still a really, really quality film, and it is worth seeing. This was one of the first, allegedly, again, the Motion Picture Association of America gave this an X rating, not for nudity or for sex, but for violence and gore.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is a rare.
And there's a kid. There's like the protagonist is a kid. You've got like a horror against children is always freaky to me, and like the revenge story is great.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the
it was
Manson
all the-
family.
Yes, it was all done hot on the heels of the Manson family. Yeah, a very interesting film. Don't be put off by the name. Don't be put off by the fact that it's an early '70s film. It really is a worthwhile watch, and it has some very interesting drug-infused elements to it.
If you're listening to this show and you're put off by a title like I Drink Your Blood, you need to go and reassess your priorities.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Well,
indeed.
That's a great selection, and I could talk about just drug horror in and of itself. We could make a whole podcast about that because there is a whole ranging gambit of very, very serious topic issues, because it is a serious topic. And on that note, I think it's always really important, and I like to take a moment to say this: anybody who is listening out there, who is or watching, if you're watching the video feed of this, if you are struggling right now, if you don't think it's possible, if you feel like you want to give up, like I said earlier in this podcast, 18 years of sobriety. I never thought it was possible for myself. I never thought I could climb out under the rug of depression or my dependence upon drugs and alcohol to get by day to day. And it is free. There is a meeting somewhere within 30 minutes to 40 minutes, even 15 minutes of where you are right now. Go on the internet and Google. And right now, even though we're in quarantine, you can do it through Zoom there, and you don't have to use video functions. You can be completely anonymous. You don't have to use your real name. I'm just imploring you to reach out and get help, because it works. It works. It works. And I am enjoying my life, and I'm enjoying horror films, and I'm enjoying this whole wonderful thing that we get to share in a way and at a level that I never thought was possible. And I want that for you if you're listening and you don't think it is possible. So please do that.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Wow, I think that's the perfect close right there.
Happy you said better. Thank you again, David, for coming on. That was very well said, and all very true words that everyone should take to heart.
Yeah. And
thanks, you guys. I love you guys. You're so passionate about this, and I'm so grateful my friend turned me on to your show, and then that we actually got to connect at Rose City, and you do great stuff here. And so thanks for having me. I can't wait to come back again in the future and do more.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Anytime, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, David. Thank you.
Bye.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Thanks so much.
I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
you.
The Masters of Horror.